Doctors could be on the brink of a breakthrough.
Migraines.
How to control them.
Tame a migraine.
A severe migraine.
Throbbing, recurring headaches.
Given all the noise, navigating the migraine experience can be confusing and scary, but you do not have to do it alone. Welcome to the Migraine Guy Podcast, the official podcast of themigraineguy.com and theheadachereview.com. Now, here's your host.
What is up, pod people? It is Kevin here, the Migraine Guy, bringing you this week's podcast. We got a lot of stuff to talk about over the next few weeks. As I said last week, there's been a few conferences that occurred, and there's been a plethora of information poured out from them. So we've got a lot of topics to cover both today and in the following weeks. So there's only one way to do that, and that is to get started. So as you know, in the new format, I'm going to give you guys an update, guys and gals. I'm going to give you an update on kind of where I'm at with my migraines, as well as try to share some, funnier, maybe lighter stories about my own experience. It's always a potential issue when you have, chronic pain, for example, to get stuck in kind of a negative feedback loop where it's just, oh, this sucks, oh, this sucks, oh, this sucks, oh, this sucks, and it's just everything sucks. And while that could be true, it's psychologically problematic, and so I'm hoping to bring a little levity to your day with just some anecdotes from my own life. But first, I just want to say thank you to every single listener, every single subscriber out there who downloaded and listened to this podcast in September. September, we almost hit 2,000 downloads of the podcast. So about 2,000 people listened to the podcast in September. So that is not only mind-blowing, given its humble beginnings a few months ago, but also just very encouraging to know that I'm not just talking to the internet ether, that there are people out there who are finding this valuable, who are finding this informative, who are finding this entertaining, finding ways in which they can not only engage with another migraine sufferer, but also just kind of sit back and hear from someone else. Sometimes in a chronic pain community, at least the few that I have seen, it's easy to get into a kind of negative feedback loop where everyone is just bemoaning their condition. Everyone is in kind of this sucky circumstance, and there's no silver lining, there's no hope, there is no willingness to find some levity in your circumstances. And I know that on the individual level, you might be in one of those very, very negative circumstances, but as a whole, people who are not in those negative circumstances can serve as, ways in which you can be inspired, ways in which you can find hope. And so that's kind of what I want from the podcast, even if I'm in a really, really low spot, even if I'm really having a terrible day. I don't want that always to come through in the podcast, because I want the podcast to be a way for you to kind of unwind and relax and get some migraine information without feeling the kind of negative emotional, psychological effects of chronic pain. So that being said, let's get to an anecdote from this previous week from me. All right, everyone, let us get started. So my migraine update has been pretty basic the last 7 days. Basic, Kevin. Basically, that means that, I've had about 5 level 3 to 5 migraines. Some of those were probably made a little worse by the fact that my sleep hasn't been great the last few nights. Not exactly sure why. A little stressed, but, not anything substantial. So just haven't been able to really sleep past about 5 o'clock in the morning. So a lot of tossing and turning after that, not really getting rested. So that kind of stinks. But the main thing that is going on with my migraines is that I'm trying to decide, and I have basically until the end of December to come to some kind of conclusion about whether or not I want to get back on to Topamax, aka Dopamax. The last time I was on Topamax, it was so cognitively disabling that I remember trying to read an article, and within one of the very first paragraphs of the article, I stared at the letters, stared at the words, and could kind of understand what the letters and words were. I could see that THE was the, and I could see that, ARGUMENT was argument, but I couldn't put it all together. I couldn't understand what the sentence was saying, what the paragraph was saying, and it was very weird, a little scary, and very, very upsetting because this medication that wasn't really helping, at least at the milligram dosage and the length of time I had taken it, wasn't really helping reduce my migraine frequency and intensity. And now on top of that, I can't even read. So that was why I went off Topamax last time. But the doc has said, the new neurologist has said that he's had a lot of success in the past with migraine patients, so long as you really give it a good 6 months to work in your system and build up. And you know, I genuinely appreciate that methodology, and I appreciate the honesty, telling me that, you know, this is a half-year process to really fine-tune not only how much Topamax you're going to take milligram dosage-wise, but also how long it's going to take to really get in your system and become effective as a preventative. So I appreciated the honesty, and, you know, left the office, whatever it was, 6-8 weeks ago, and I've just been thinking about it. He sent me an email the other day saying, yep, we should, you know, be considering Topamax, but I understand if you don't want to try it, perhaps we could do something like GABA in order to help reduce your migraine pain, but I'd prefer doing Topamax. So I'm just kind of in that place where I'm deciding if I want to try a new medication right now or not. I do have a couple things I want to talk to him. Our next appointment is end of December. I think it's December 30th or 28th or something like that. And basically, the question I want to ask, two questions I want to ask him is, one, what's the lowest milligram dosage that we can get in Topamax? Is it 5 milligrams, 10 milligrams, 20 milligrams, you know, like what's the lowest dosage? And two, does it come in a time release tablet? And the reason I'm interested in time release tablets is the way that I understand time release works versus non-time release is that if you don't have a time release tablet, when you ingest it, it all hits your system at once and then slowly gets worked out over the course of a day. Whereas a time release tablet, you take it and then, you know, bits of it are released into your system throughout the day. So even if you're on a 10 milligram tab, on a time released, right, at any given time, there would only be, you know, a couple milligrams in your system. And so the reason I want to start low and potentially with time release is that I don't want to go from nothing in my system, Topamax wise, to now 20 milligrams or 50 milligrams or whatever he wants to prescribe, because the last time that happened, I had such bad cognitive side effects. So I want to start on the very, very low end and work my way up. And hopefully on the very lowest end, I won't really notice too many negative side effects. Now, I don't know if on those lowest ends that there's going to be really any migraine prevention, but I would rather do what I've been doing with my current level of migraine, survive in the way I have been, and not have terrible cognitive side effects than, you know, jumping into a bunch of cognitive side effects and having to wait 6 months to see if the medication's even effective at reducing my migraines. So that's basically my little migraine update. Nothing really interesting going on other than I've started working out more consistently now that the house is more organized and there's some projects to do that involve chopping down trees and stuff. So I've been swinging an axe and lifting some weights, and those kind of things typically help reduce my migraine pain when I'm doing them. It's not like I work out and then my day is migraine free. It's for, you know, the hour or so that I'm working out, my migraine pain and intensity goes down pretty substantially. And so getting back into a routine like that has been pretty nice because, for example, yesterday I had a pretty rough migraine that was starting. You know, I didn't sleep well, woke up about 4, and by about 7 or 8 in the morning, my migraine was starting to slam me. So, you know, I threw some ice on, took some naproxen, 500 milligrams of that. I didn't want to take a triptan because I had to go drive to some places shortly after that, and triptan's almost guaranteed make me very dizzy. It's about 50-50 whether or not they're going to stop the migraine, but it's almost 100% that they're going to make me really dizzy, and I don't want to drive and endanger myself or others by being really dizzy. So I didn't want to take the triptan. So I went out in the back with an axe and just chopped some wood. You know, swinging an axe is also a really good way to relieve some of the anger associated with getting another migraine, right? You can kind of personify your migraine in the wood and then, you know, cut it in half. So cathartic experience, if nothing else. So that's kind of where I am at with the migraines. Nothing big, just weighing whether or not I want to get back on a medication. I'm currently not on any medications other than abortives when I need them. So that is that's where I'm at. What do you think? You have any recommendations about what I could talk to the doctor about in regards to Topamax? Are you aware of any time-release versions of it, or do you know what the lowest milligram dosage is that he could prescribe? If you do, hit me up on social media. Let me know on Facebook or Twitter or YouTube or Instagram, wherever you're listening to this. Let me know. I want to be as informed as possible when I go talk to the doc. Like I said, it's not till the end of November, so I haven't really done the research side. I've just been weighing my own personal considerations about it. But as November approaches, as the end of November approaches, I'll certainly get more into the research side of things. But I want to hear what you know. We're smarter together than I am on my own, so let me know what your thoughts are. Now, let's get into some migraine diet news. Let's see, coming out of Vancouver, Canada last week, there was some preliminary evidence to suggest that daily dietary supplementation that introduced ketones into your body might reduce the frequency of your migraine headaches up to, according to the study, 50%. They had all participants average at about 16 migraine episodes a month, and after doing this ketone-based study, found that the reported average was at 8. So that's a 50% reduction, which is enormous from something as simple as changing aspects of your diet. Now, as with all studies, sample size, background, genetic factors, all of those things are important and are certainly going to change the actual likelihood that a dietary change is going to affect your migraines in a positive way, especially at the 50% level. But even a 10%, 20% reduction in migraine frequency and intensity for some people is going to be enough for them to consider a dietary change like this. So let's talk a little bit about the dietary change. First of all, what is a ketone? What is ketosis? What in the world does any of this mean? Well, I certainly am no nutritionist or biologist, but a low-carb diet you may have heard of does force your body after a certain amount of time to go into ketosis. Typically, your body is going to rely on glucose in your bloodstream in order to provide energy to your cells. This is also, of course, part of the problem with people who have type 1 or type 2 diabetes. Your body doesn't properly deal with the glucose there, and a variety of negative health effects come out of it, which is also actually why some research over the last 10 or so years has pointed to a low-carb diet being beneficial for people who have type 2 diabetes, at least, because if you reduce the carbs in your diet, then you reduce the sugar, which means your blood sugar won't spike, and you won't have to rely on insulin production or insulin injection in order to balance it out. Now, what happens when you reduce your glucose intake from your diet means that your body needs another source of energy. Your body is, as people say, as you learn in your freshman biology class, your body is like a car, and a car is not going to move anywhere without fuel. Neither is your body. Your body needs fuel, and so in place of glucose, it is going to start using what are known as ketones. And ketones, you can look up all of the details on online if you want to, but a ketone basically is a different way to provide your cells with energy, and in fact provides more energy per ketone than per glucose particle. I actually don't know what the full measurement is in terms of ketone to glucose. I don't know if it is something like per milligram, per liter, per whatever, but in general, how about that? In general, ketones are going to provide more ATP to your cells than glucose will, and so it's a better source of energy in that area. Now, the study didn't force or ask the participants to reduce their glucose levels by going on a low-carb diet. What they did was they introduced a kind of supplement, a thing that they could mix with liquids, water typically, in order to force ketones into their system. And so, if you have some sort of ketogenic powder that you pour into your water, stir it up, drink it, then your body now has a surplus of ketones that it needs to do something with. And since ketones are a superior source of energy, very often those ketones will be used instead of glucose. And what the study found, as I said, was that was that there was about a 50% reduction in the participants' migraine frequency. Yeah, so, quote, she added, the study author, she added that in pilot observations for efficacy, the drop in ketones was accompanied by a reduction in migraine frequency from a mean of 16 days per month to 8 days per month. And that, of course, was in the first month of supplementation, end quote. And so the drop in ketones, according to the researchers, showed that the ketones were being utilized for energy, and that coincided with a 50% reduction in migraine frequency. And so the idea is that when you're using ketones rather than glucose, something's happened in your body that is also resulting in migraine reduction. So that is extremely interesting. You don't have to go on a low carb diet, this study is showing, in order to see the benefits of increasing the ketones in your bloodstream. And so that's interesting, right? Because we as migraine sufferers can do a lot with our diet in terms of trying to figure out whether or not certain things are triggers, whether or not certain things can help us see reduction in migraine frequency and intensity. And doing something like going on a low carb diet can sometimes be a huge change for people, because now instead of having oatmeal for breakfast and maybe a sandwich at lunch and whatever else you eat throughout the day, now you have to be focused on getting a ton of fat grams in your diet and a ton of protein grams in your diet, because you're not allowed to eat carbs, and that's what a basic diet consists of, protein, fat, and carbs. And not a lot of people want to eat tons of meat regularly. Not a lot of people want to eat a ton of butter and olive oil throughout the day. Maybe butter sounds pretty good, right? Low carb diet lets you eat a ton of butter, so maybe that's its saving grace. But in general, a huge diet change like that can be pretty difficult, not only to get into, but also maintain. You might be able to force yourself into it for a couple weeks, but are you going to be able to commit to it after 3 or 4 months? It is not very likely. That's why this study is interesting, because it shows that there are a lot of ketogenic powders out there that you can add to your beverages. And if you're doing that and it results in migraine reduction, migraine frequency reduction, that would be pretty cool. So I actually had a company reach out to me a while ago, maybe, I don't know if it was a full year, but it was at least 6 months ago. And they sent me a couple pouches of their ketogenic stuff. And it was 2 or 3 little pouches, and that really isn't enough, right? The study, for example, went over an entire month, so 2 or 3 was enough for about a day and a half for me, which really isn't a sufficient amount of time to test the product's efficacy. But it certainly could be something that we all try by getting a month's supply of ketogenic powder and regularly intaking it. Now, the study is a little, or the article at least on the study, is a little ambiguous as to how much of the ketogenic powder was added to liquids, or how much of the ketogenic drink they gave regularly, and what the dosage levels were, and that kind of stuff. So there's probably going to be some trial and error should you decide to try some sort of ketogenic approach to reducing your migraine pain and intensity. But it's something that is well within your grasp to do. Now, there is the other side of the coin, that because low-carb diets are kind of popular right now, especially amongst certain kind of athletes, that the cost associated with these kind of ketogenic powders that you can add to beverages is going to be higher than you might be comfortable in spending. And that's, totally justified. I fully understand the limitations of one's budget. But then you might consider going on a ketogenic diet for a few months. Now, just a few tips about going on a new diet. It's rarely a good idea to just flip, right? It's really a good idea just to go from one diet style for many years and then one day change it to something else. I actually tried a low carb diet before my migraines got chronic for very, very different reasons than what we're talking about today. And I was on it for, what was it, like 6 weeks? And so there, it was a protein heavy diet, a fat heavy diet. You eat a lot of, chicken and beef and fish and all those kind of things, and tuna, and you have some vegetables, of course, a little bit of cheese, and olive oil and butter. And that's great for a while, but I did, this is the ironic part. When I was on the ketogenic diet, I did get raging headaches. How's that for irony? I got raging headaches. Now, if you cruise some of the ketogenic discussion forums and whatever, they kind of actually refer to this as the carb hangover headache. And they say that, your body's, quote, addicted to carbs and getting off of them is causing, quote, withdrawals. I don't know about any of the science behind that, if there's anything to even really support those claims, or if they're just kind of anecdotal pieces of evidence that they're interpreting as being a result of coming off of carbs. But the point is that if you're going to transition to a new diet, I would do it slowly. I would give yourself a full month to transition from a diet that's like a third protein, a third fat, and a third carbs to a diet that is basically 50% carbs, 50% protein. 50% fats, 50% protein, and no carbs, or very, very little carbs. I would do that over a month. And then the following month would be your test month. See if your migraines are reduced when you're on this new diet. So it's pretty interesting. Of course, I'm going to link to the article I am talking about in the show notes below. The title of the article is Dietary Supplement with Ketones May Mitigate Migraine Attacks. Came out of the 18th Congress of the International Headache Society, which just finished up in Vancouver, Canada. So pretty interesting stuff. Definitely something to think about. Definitely something you're capable of doing at home, capable of doing on your own. Now, there are, of course, things you need to talk about with your doctor if you have questions about diet change, especially if you do have diabetes, because sometimes being in ketosis, according to what your doctor would say, could be a sign that you're actually in trouble with your diabetes. And so that's something you want to definitely make sure your doctor's aware of, hear their thoughts on it. This isn't supposed to be, well, it's just your diet, so you don't have to worry about what your doctor says. No, you need to always be telling your doctor about these big changes, because it affects how your treatment's going to work. And there might be things that you and I don't know about the current health condition you have that they are aware of, such that a diet change could actually negatively impact that kind of stuff. So always run it by your doctor. Don't keep anything from them because you're afraid of what they're going to say, or because you don't want to make the phone call. They get paid a lot of money to make sure you are healthy, so get your money's worth out of them. All right, that is that article. As far as migraine news goes, there was something that is of great interest probably to many, many migraine sufferers out there that involves something known as a comorbid condition. If you're not familiar with that term, what it means is something that you're likely to encounter if you get migraines. So if you get migraines, your comorbid likelihood of getting like depression, for example, goes up significantly. And so if you have one condition, the likelihood of having a comorbid condition is basically the likelihood that you're also going to have something else. And so this particular article was about the comorbid condition known as coronary artery disease. And this recent study that was published has basically decided that there is a genetic link between the two. And just to quote from the study, from epidemiological studies, there is a known comorbidity between migraine and both cervical artery dissection and CAD. It is intriguing that some of the same genetic variants seem to be involved in all three disorders, but with partly opposite effect directions, end quote. And so basically, this study is saying that there seems to be two, maybe three parts of your genes that are directly linked in regards to migraines and this coronary artery disease. And so that's pretty interesting, because if you have one, you might be at a higher risk to have the other. And so it does go both ways, right? If you have migraines, you might be more likely to have CAD. And if you have CAD, that might actually put you at a higher likelihood to get migraines. And it's pretty interesting for a number of reasons, one of which is that the approach to treating migraines might also need to consider examining and treating CAD conditions, and vice versa. And so it is interesting that this article is linking the two genetically. And so I think the big upshot here is that if you do get chronic migraines or migraines at any regular interval, it wouldn't hurt to talk to your doctor about having whatever kind of tests they can do for different cardiac issues. Because you don't want to be working hard to get your migraine frequency and intensity down only to then be told that you have one of these horrible cardiovascular conditions that is going to require surgeries and different medications. You want to try to catch everything as early as possible. And so if you're talking to your doctor, you can print off this article, you can bring it in so that they can look at it and just say, hey, I'm kind of concerned. What can we do to rule this out as a possibility for me, or what can we do to help mitigate it in the future if my migraines and these CAD conditions are actually linked? Am I going to in 10 years need to be put on some sort of medication to help deal with those effects? What can we do today? So I think a lot of these comorbid studies that get done can actually sound pretty scary, right? Because, if you have migraines, like I said, you're more likely to get depression, more likely to have anxiety, more likely to have strokes. And so those all, are catchy headlines. They're easy ways to get people to click on the articles. But I think the upshot of all that is, well, now that we know that those comorbidities are higher, the likelihood of having them are higher, we need to address them in whatever ways we can right now. That way in 10 years, we aren't suffering the negative effects from those comorbid conditions. And so it's definitely something to keep in mind when you are talking with your doctor, definitely something to keep in mind when you're thinking about what dietary choices you're going to make. Definitely interesting if you're thinking about trying to incorporate some exercise into your daily lifestyle just to be more active. Some studies show that, physical activity can actually help reduce migraine pain and intensity. And even if that just means doing some leg raises at your desk at work or trying to do a few push-ups every day, all of that can be beneficial. Of course, some of those things like exercise can help reduce your overall risk for coronary artery disease as well as other cardiovascular issues. So diet considerations, things to talk about with your doctor, and activity considerations, I think are the upshot to studies that show these kind of comorbid probabilities being higher for migraine sufferers. We don't need to worry all the time because we're more likely to have certain conditions because of our migraines. We need to think, well, okay, so I have higher likelihood of getting this, so what else can I do to prevent it? And that's not always easy to do, especially if you're having a rough migraine day. But I think that is not the best approach, but I think it's a wise approach to go take all the information you can and try to come up with the best protocol for your migraines, both with your doctor and in your daily life. And just like that, we have wrapped up another podcast this week. Hope you enjoyed the content. Try to pick out a couple interesting articles, some things not only that are interesting, but things that you can do something about, things that have actionable items in them, even if that's just talking to your doctor about potentially having CAD concerns, or if you're going to do something like a drastic diet change. All of that's very interesting. All of that's very helpful to headache and migraine sufferers, but all of it should be done in consultation, of course, with your doctor. So I wanted to give you some practical tools today, as well as some interesting topics. We broke the 30-minute mark here on the podcast. That's the first time I think that's ever happened. So interesting. Hope you were able to survive here until the end listening to my voice. If you like the new format, please continue to hit me up on whatever social media platform you like, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. Let me know your comments on the format. Especially let me know if there are articles out there that you have found interesting and want to be talked about here on the podcast. Or if you have questions, you can, of course, send those to me, and maybe I'll answer them on the podcast. Might do a new section where we have listener questions, and I can answer to the best of my ability whatever you're asking, or at least link you or connect you with people who are better equipped to answer those questions. I think that's going to wrap it up. So until next week, everyone, take it easy. If you want to help keep everything that the Migraine Guy does free, then you can become a patron over at the website patreon.com. That's Patreon.com. Patreon lets people contribute funds to other people whose work they value. Becoming a patron does things for me, such as allowing me to buy new products so that I can do product review videos so that you know whether or not a given migraine product actually works before you buy it. It also helps me do things like upgrade the microphones and cameras for both the YouTube channel and this podcast. And more importantly, it helps me be accountable to you, my migraine community. You can pledge as low as $1 a month if you want to, and every single dollar does help. Just head over to patreon.com/themigraineguy to become a patron today.